Think about just the sheer scale of our naval operations all over the world.
Yeah, ships at sea, bases in, like, really far-flung places.
It's a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
And, keeping all that secure, it takes a dedicated force working behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
So today, we're doing a deep dive into exactly that force, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS.
Exactly, yeah. We've pulled together some really comprehensive sources, materials that trace how NCIS evolved and how it works now.
Highlighting its role in protecting naval assets, personnel.
That's the core of it,
Yeah.
safeguarding the Navy and Marine Corps.
Right. And for anyone wanting to understand that whole defense network, NCIS is like a central piece.
Definitely.
It's way broader, way deeper than you might think from, pop culture.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just solving crimes on ships.
No, it's everything from, criminal stuff to really complex national security threats, counterterrorism,
It's a very
cyber.
gamut.
So our mission here is to kind of cut through all the details, pull out the most important bits of NCIS, its history, structure, what it actually does.
Makes sense. Lay it all out clearly.
So let's start right at the beginning. Where did this whole thing even come from?
Okay, so the story really kicks off way back 1882.
1882, wow.
Yeah, with Navy Department General Order 292. That established the Office of Naval Intelligence.
ONI.
ONI, okay. So the focus back then wasn't really crime, was it?
No, not initially.
It was more about intelligence, information on adversary.
Precisely. ONI's first jobs were pretty different. They were mostly gathering intel on foreign navies.
Like what kind of ships they had, weapons.
Exactly. Specifics like that.
Mm.
Plus mapping foreign waters, even checking out overseas fortifications, factories.
Huh. So building that basic picture of potential threats.
Right. A totally different kind of investigation compared to now.
You said this changed, especially as the world got closer to World War I.
Yes. Big time. As tensions rose, ONI's job expanded quite a bit.
They got tasked with espionage, sabotage, actively trying to get info on potential enemies, through secret operations.
Okay, so that's a real shift. More towards the kind of investigative work we think of with NCIS.
Definitely. A significant turn.
And didn't they set up shop somewhere kind of low-key?
They did, yeah. The very first branch office, just a small undercover unit, was actually in New York City.
Interesting. Shows they knew they needed people on the ground early on.
Right. And it sounds like they were using all sorts of people back then.
Very much so. They relied heavily on a mix. Reserve personnel, active duty folks, and even civilian operatives. Civilians.
Yeah, and get this, a lot of them were unpaid volunteers.
Wow. Really underscores the urgency, maybe, and how informal things were back then.
Yeah, I think so. Now, after World War I, things naturally slowed down a bit, I assume.
Absolutely. Investigative work dropped off significantly.
Makes sense.
But in the mid-1920s, they did try to organize volunteer reserve intelligence officers.
Keeping a trained group ready just in case.
Exactly. The idea was to have people who could be called up if another emergency happened. Keep an eye on threats to the Navy. So the seeds were there for a more structured investigative unit, even if it wasn't quite there yet.
Right. The groundwork was being laid.
When did we start seeing a real, dedicated investigative capability take shape?
Okay, the early to mid-1930s were really key for that, developing an independent, professional investigative arm within the Navy.
What was the turning point?
A big moment was 1936. They hired the first civilian agent in Washington, D.C.
First civilian agent.
Yeah, and interestingly, his salary first came straight from the Director of Naval Intelligence's own pocket.
No way. That's pretty unconventional. Shows how maybe ad hoc it still was.
Definitely highlights the somewhat informal beginnings.
So how did that one guy turn into a larger force?
Slowly. A few civilian special agents got assigned to different naval districts, starting also in 36.
Just a few.
Yeah, but by September 1937, there were still only 14 of them across the whole country. So slow but steady growth.
Then another world war looming. Things must have ramped up again.
Oh, without a doubt. June 1939, President Roosevelt issued a directive. He specifically tasked ONI with investigating sabotage, espionage, subversive activities linked to the Navy.
So a clear green light to really boost their investigative role.
Absolutely, a direct mandate.
And that meant a big mobilization during World War II.
Yes. By the fall of 1940, tons of intelligence reservists were called up for both investigation and counterintelligence.
Yeah.
And once the U.S. entered the war, the Navy's investigative side was largely staffed by these reserve officers.
What were they mainly focused on during the war years?
Top priorities were things like personnel security checks,
Right.
investigating sabotage, espionage,
Makes sense.
also monitoring Japanese activities inside the U.S., and dealing with war fraud cases.
A lot on their plate.
Huge amount. The volume was immense. In 1943 alone, they handled over 97,000 investigations.
97,000.
Yep. Under the name Naval Intelligence Service back then.
Wow, that number really gives you a sense of the scale during the war.
It does.
And then, after World War I, another post-war shrink down.
Correct. After WWII ended, general demobilization happened. Only a small core of civilian special agents stuck around.
Even though their jurisdiction expanded.
Yeah, the Secretary of the Navy did expand their investigative jurisdiction in 1945. But a big personnel increase didn't really happen again until the Korean conflict.
Ah, so Korea spurred another buildup of civilian agents.
Right.
It sounds like for a long time, though, things were pretty decentralized. Different districts kind of did their own thing.
That's a really key point. Yeah, until the late 50s, the district intelligence offices reported to the local naval district commandants.
Which meant?
It often meant investigations were localized, sometimes fragmented. You even had different districts overlapping sometimes, doing similar work without coordination.
Right, not very efficient. So the need for a more unified system became pretty obvious.
Exactly. The workload, the number of people, the scope of what they were doing investigations, counterintelligence, it all grew after Korea.
And that highlighted the problems with the old decentralized way.
Totally. So that led to a whole series of big organizational changes, policy shifts through the 50s and 60s, refining your mission, their structure.
And all that change eventually led to the forerunner of NCIS.
Yes. It all came together in February 1966 with the establishment of the Naval Investigative Service, NIS.
NIS. Okay, that's a name people might recognize. A crucial step.
A very crucial step towards a more centralized professional agency.
And around then, we even started seeing agents deployed right onto ships, a totally different environment.
That's right. Early 70s, an NIS special agent was stationed on the USS Intrepid for about 6 months.
Wow.
That was the start of the Deployment Afloat program. Now it's called Special Agent Afloat.
Putting agents on year-long assignments with carrier groups, amphibious groups.
Exactly. A unique deployment.
That must have presented a whole new set of challenges, a different kind of investigative work.
Absolutely. And around that same time, 1972, another big change happened.
What was that?
Background investigations. Security clearance checks got transferred out of NIS
Oh, to where?
to the newly formed Defense Investigative Service, DIS.
Okay, so that let NIS focus more on.
Criminal investigations and counterintelligence operations sharpened their focus.
Got it. And the agency itself was changing internally too, wasn't it? Becoming more diverse.
Yes, the 70s also saw NIS bring in its first female agent. She was stationed at Naval Air Station Miramar in California in 1975.
An important milestone.
Definitely.
Okay, moving into the 80s, it seems like NIS started getting more prominent within the Navy structure.
It did. October 81, NIS became a second echelon command, reporting to the Chief of Naval Operations.
So higher up the chain.
Right. Then, in August 85, the Secretary of the Navy mandated that a flag rank officer, an admiral, had to be the commander of NIS.
An admiral, that's a big deal.
Huge, reporting directly to the Chief of Naval Operations and the Secretary of the Navy. Rear Admiral Cathal Flynn, a Navy SEAL, was the first admiral to lead NIS.
Wow. That definitely signals a major increase in the agency's importance.
For sure. Reflected its growing role.
And they also started training with other federal agencies around this time.
Absolutely. Starting in 84, NIS special agents began training down at FLETC.
FLETC.
The Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Georgia, training alongside agents from, most other federal agencies, except FBI and DEA at that time.
Okay, standardizing their training with the broader federal LE community.
Exactly.
Now, the Cold War, that must have brought its own unique challenges.
Yeah.
How did NIS adapt?
Yeah, the Cold War saw NIS step up big time in counterterrorism, especially after the Beirut Marine Barracks bombing.
Right, a terrible event. What did they do?
They set up the Anti-Terrorist Alert Center, ATAC.
ATAC.
It was the 247 Operational Intelligence Hub. Its whole purpose was to give warnings about potential terrorist threats to Navy and Marine commands.
A crucial function. But tragically, that center itself became linked to a major spy case, didn't it?
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
ATAC was where Jonathan Pollard worked when he committed espionage.
Pollard.
Right?
He was convicted in '87.
Correct. That whole incident really hammered home how vital internal security and strong counterintelligence are, even within the agency itself.
A tough lesson. And ATAC later changed.
Yeah, in 2002, it was revamped into the Multiple Threat Alert Center, MTAE, reflecting, a wider range of threats beyond just terrorism.
Makes sense. It sounds like the mid-'80s were just packed with changes for NIS.
They really were. November '85, NIS got redesignated again, became the Naval Security and Investigative Command, NSIC.
NSIC, so another name change and a broader mission?
Exactly. This significantly expanded their job description. They now manage the whole department of the Navy security program.
Meaning?
Information security, physical security, personnel security, plus handling security clearance adjudications again, and overseeing Navy law enforcement and physical security programs.
Wow, so a huge expansion beyond just investigations.
Massive.
So NSIC even took over things like the Master at Arms program and the military working dogs?
Precisely. Both of those fell under NSIC. And then in '86, the Department of the Navy Central Adjudication Facility, NCIS, was set up under NSIC.
Making them responsible for clearance decisions again?
Yes, responsible for the adjudications and decisions, though not the initial background checks themselves, which were still with DIS. And Don Tiaf handled a huge volume of those determinations every year.
Okay. And the agency's name kept morphing, it seems.
It did. September '88, NSIC got renamed again to Naval Investigative Service Command, NASC.
NISC, so many acronyms.
Tell me about it. But interestingly, even with that official change, most people still just call it NIS.
Really?
Yeah, the command part mainly referred to the headquarters, kind of like how the Army's CID works. The field still thought of it as NIS.
Okay. Then we get to the early 90s and Tailhook. That sounds like it was a massive turning point.
Oh, absolutely pivotal. The 1991 Tailhook scandal, serious allegations of sexual misconduct, harassment by Navy and Marine officers, it triggered a huge NIS investigation.
But the investigation itself came under fire.
Big time. There was considerable public criticism, government criticism, about how NIS handled it.
What were the main complaints?
Concerns about the actual investigative techniques they used, potential issues with the chain of command maybe interfering, and just a general feeling that there wasn't enough independent civilian oversight in the whole process. Senator Sam Nunn, chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee then, he publicly questioned the Navy's whole approach.
So, heat from Congress. And it wasn't just external criticism.
No, the Pentagon's own Inspector General came down hard on NIS leadership too.
Really?
Yeah, cited a top-down culture that apparently didn't cooperate well with other Navy authorities during the investigation.
Ouch. It sounds like the pressure for some fundamental change was really intense.
It absolutely was. By '92, the acting Secretary of the Navy, Sean O'Keefe, recommended putting criminal right into the name.
To clarify their main job.
Exactly. Define that core investigative function more clearly. In the end, the commander of NIS was forced to retire, and the whole agency underwent a major reorganization.
And this is finally where we get NCIS as we know it today.
Precisely. In 1993, NIS was reorganized and officially became the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS.
And crucially, under civilian leadership.
Yes, that was key. Roy Nedrow, who'd been an executive with the Secret Service, was appointed the first civilian director. That leadership shift was a direct response to all the criticism.
A really significant change, both in leadership and structure.
Huge. Nedrow oversaw restructuring NCIS into a proper federal law enforcement agency. It got 14 field offices controlling operations globally, about 140 locations.
Marking that clear break from the military-led past.
Exactly. Firmly establishing their identity as a law enforcement agency.
And since '93, NCIS has just kept evolving, right? Adapting to new challenges.
Absolutely. Constantly adapting. In '95, they set up the Cold Case Homicide Unit.
First federal unit of its kind.
That's right. And it's had a lot of success solving old cases. We've also seen a whole series of directors leading the agency since Nedrow, each bringing their own focus.
And their ties with other law enforcement agencies have gotten stronger, too.
Yes, definitely. Like a formal agreement, a memorandum of understanding was signed with the Marine Corps CID in '99, spelled out how they'd cooperate.
USMC CID, right?
And then a really big one in 2000. Congress gave NCIS civilian special agents the power to execute warrants and make arrests.
Okay. That really solidifies their status as federal law enforcement officers?
Full powers.
Full powers. Early 2000s, that brought huge new threats. USS Cole bombing, 9/11.
Those were absolute pivotal events. They led directly to transforming ATAC into MTAC, the Multiple Threat Alert Center, in 2002.
broadening the focus beyond just terrorism.
Right. And it's worth noting, NCIS agents were actually among the very first U.S. law enforcement on the scene after the Cole bombing, the Limburg bombing in Yemen, and that terrorist attack in Mombasa.
Shows their rapid global response capability.
Definitely.
But their work isn't just counterterrorism, is it? You hear about big fraud cases, too.
Oh, yeah. NCIS has cracked numerous major fraud investigations. Since '97, they've recovered over $500 million for the U.S. government and the Navy.
$500 million, wow.
Yeah, significant recoveries. Plus, they investigate any death on a Navy ship, plane, or base unless it's clearly natural causes.
Right. And they still oversee the Master-at-Arms and the dog programs.
Still do. Oversight for both.
So their core mission today seems pretty clear-cut.
It is. NCIS has three main strategic priorities: prevent terrorism, protect secrets, and reduce crime. Simple goals, complex work.
Prevent, protect, reduce. And they've adapted to the digital age, too. You mentioned an internet wiretap.
Yes, NCIS Special Agent Peter Garza conducted the first court-ordered internet wiretap in the U.S. Shows they're keeping up with technology.
And the Pollard case we mentioned earlier, a constant reminder of the counterintelligence part of protect the secrets.
Exactly, a critical function.
The agency's internal structure has kept changing, too, even more recently.
Yeah, 2010 saw some big organizational shifts. Creation of the National Security Directorate, the Global Operations Directorate.
Streamlining things, focusing on specific threats.
Seems like it. A more focused approach. We also saw NCIS briefly looking into possible links between Occupy Wall Street and labor groups based on an FBI report back then.
Interesting side note. And some administrative functions got consolidated, too.
Right. In 2013, the Don CCAF, that Navy Clearance Adjudication Facility, it got merged into the larger DoD CF Defense Department Central Adjudications Facility.
Centralizing things at the DoD level.
Exactly. And then after the terrible Washington Navy Yard shooting in 2014, NCIS formed the Regional Enforcement Action Capabilities Training Team, REACT.
REACT, to help with high-risk operations.
Precisely. Enhanced support for those situations. And even more recently, late 2019, some more tweaks. Reactivated the Central Field Office, changed some deputy director roles.
So clearly a complex organization, always adjusting. Let's dig into that structure a bit more. How does it work inside today?
Okay, so within NCIS, you've got the hierarchy for special agents. Starts at entry-level SA, goes all the way up to the director.
Standard structure.
Right. And interestingly, a lot of the key supervisor jobs at HQ are actually held by sworn special agents, but they're in civilian positions.
Okay. And they have different credentials, badges.
Yeah. Special agents get a gold badge. Then you have agents who are reservist investigators and operational representatives. They get silver badges.
And administrative staff.
They get official credentials, but no badge.
Got it. And at the very top, who does the director answer to?
The director reports straight to the Secretary of the Navy, supervised by the Undersecretary. There's also an NCIS Board of Directors, chaired by the Undersecretary, that gives strategic advice.
Okay. And the director runs the agency through?
Two deputy directors, one for operations, one for operational support.
Ops and support. Makes sense.
And those deputies oversee executive assistant directors, assistant directors, who manage all the different operational and support directorates.
Lots of layers.
It's a big organization. And it's really important to remember they work super closely with lots of other agencies. DOJ, FDI on Joint Terrorism Task Forces, ATF, lots of collaboration.
Right. They don't operate in a vacuum. Where's HQ located now?
NCIS headquarters is at the Russell Knox building in Quantico, Virginia.
Quantico. Home to lots of military and federal agencies.
Exactly. Co-located with other military investigative HQs, which helps with that interagency cooperation. Before 2011, they were at the Washington Navy Yard.
Okay. So Quantico's the nerve center. What about out in the field? How is that structured?
Well, the director's office is the central admin arm. Operationally, you have these functional directorates like national security, criminal operations, setting agency-wide standards.
Right.
And then you have geographic field directorates, Atlantic Ops, Pacific Ops, plus the functional Global Ops Directorate. They actually carry out the mission in their specific zones.
Atlantic, Pacific, Global. Got it. And those are breaking down further.
Yep. Those directorates oversee field offices, each run by a special agent in charge, SAC.
SAC. Common term in federal LE.
Right. And the SACs manage assistant SAs and supervisory special agents in their regions.
And even more local units under those field offices.
Exactly. Field offices oversee NCIS resident agencies or NCIS RUs. usually headed by a supervisory special agent,
NCIS RU.
and even smaller detachments called NCIS resident units. NCIS RUs could be just 1 or 2 agents.
NCIS use. Okay. And the agents afloat on ships.
Those special agent afloat posts are also designated as NCIS RUs. Administratively, they fall under the field office for the ship's home port.
But operationally,
Operationally, they get support from the field office wherever the ship is deployed at that moment.
makes sense. Flexible support. Let's talk about some of those key directorates. National security sounds absolutely critical right now.
Oh, it is. National Security Directorate has the lead on counterterrorism, counterintelligence investigations, and operations.
So espionage, terrorism.
Espionage, terrorism, cyber intrusions trying to steal sensitive info, insider threats, threats to R&D programs, all of that.
Their main job is making sure NCIS personnel can protect Navy and Marine assets and info from, well, everyone trying to get it.
Basically, yes.
Okay.
From terrorists and foreign spies.
And the Criminal Investigations and Operations Directorate, that covers a huge range of crime.
Exactly. Everything from death investigations, sexual assaults, drug trafficking, all the way to procurement fraud. Fraud involving contracts and purchasing.
So the more traditional law enforcement side, but in a Navy-Marine context.
Right. And they develop the training and resources for agents to handle all that, managing major criminal cases for the Navy and Marines.
Then there's global operations. Sounds like it has a massive worldwide reach.
It really does. Global Ops manages the field units doing worldwide investigations, espionage, counterintel, protective services for VIPs, economic crimes, contingency response like deploying after an attack, technical surveillance countermeasures, polygraphs, specialized tech services, forensics.
Wow, a lot. Where are they based?
A lot of their subordinate units are headquartered down at Joint Base Anacostia Bowling in D.C., but they have people and detachments all over the world.
Makes sense for global operations.
Right. It includes units like the Contingency Response Field Office, Cyber Ops Field Office, Economic Crimes, Office of Forensic Support, critical components.
And the geographic ones, Atlantic and Pacific. More regional focus.
Yep. Atlantic operations covers everything in the eastern U.S., Europe, Africa, South America, the Middle East, plus East Coast ships. HQ is in Virginia Beach.
Okay. And Pacific?
Pacific Ops handles the western U.S., Asia, Australia, and West Coast Indo-Pacific-based ships. HQ is in San Diego.
And both of those have their own field offices within those regions.
Yeah, exactly. Like Atlantic has the Carolinas field office covering North and South Carolina. Pacific has the Far East field office covering Northeast Asia. Specific geographic responsibilities.
It's a truly massive global footprint. What about specialized units like the Behavioral Science Group?
Yeah, the BSG. They provide specialized psychological consulting, helping investigators understand behavior in criminal cases, counterintel, counterterrorism. Very valuable insights.
Like profilers.
Sort of, yeah. Behavioral analysis. Then there's the Office of Military Support, OMS.
Who's that?
Active duty and reserve military personnel. They provide all kinds of support to NCIS protective details, admin help, lots of roles.
Okay. And the agency's own critical support functions, HR, IT, Intel, they have their own directorates too?
Correct. Those fall under the Deputy Director of Operational Support. You've got directorates handling cyber investigations and forensics, intelligence analysis and sharing.
Which includes MTI.
Right. Intel Directorate runs MTAC.
Yeah.
Then you have Enterprise Management handling HR, training at FLETC, security for NCIS facilities, IT systems, communications.
All the essential internal stuff.
Absolutely. And strategy, planning, and business operations, they develop the agency's big picture strategy, manage the money, handle public engagement.
Got it. We should also probably loop back to some of those specialized programs like Special Agent Afloat.
Definitely. Special Agent Afloat is critical, putting agents right there on deployed ships, carriers, subs, amphibious ships.
Providing investigation, counter-intel, force protection support directly to the commanders at sea.
Exactly. Operating in a really unique, often tough environment.
And they have a specific unit just for protecting high-ranking folks?
Yes, the Protective Operations Field Office.
POFO.
POFO. Who do they protect?
Key Navy and Marine leaders. Chief of Naval Operations, Commandant of the Marine Corps, people like that. And within PFO, there's a Protective Intelligence Unit, PIU.
PIU does what? Threat assessment.
Exactly. Identifying and trying to mitigate potential threats against the people they protect.
Okay. And MTAC, we've mentioned it a few times. Can you break down its role again?
Sure. MTAC is basically a fusion center. It pulls together intel from NCIS's global network and other sources.
To identify, assess, and push out warnings about all kinds of threats. Terrorism, foreign intelligence, cyber, criminal to Navy and Marine personnel and assets anywhere in the world. Real-time operational support.
Crucial intel hub. Now, for high-risk stuff in the U.S., they have REACT.
That's right, the Regional Enforcement Action Capabilities Team. REACT. They provide tactical support.
Like SWAT teams.
Kind of, yeah. Support for investigations, high-risk warrant service, undercover ops, that sort of thing, within the U.S.
And for crime scenes, collecting evidence.
They have the Major Case Response Team, MCRT.
MCRT.
They handle complex crime scene processing, collecting all kinds of physical evidence, fingerprints, DNA, digital media. They have teams worldwide ready to deploy quickly to major incidents.
Specialized crime scene units. And finally, every agency needs internal oversight, right? The Inspector General.
Exactly. NCIS has its own Office of the Inspector General, OIG.
And their job is?
Investigating allegations of waste, fraud, abuse, misconduct within NCIS. They also do internal inspections and oversee the Intelligence Oversight Program.
Making sure NCIS follows the rules and protects people's rights.
That's the goal, ensuring compliance and protecting rights and privacy.
It must take a certain kind of person to become an NCIS special agent. What are the basic qualifications?
Well, there are specific age limits, vision standards. You got to be a U.S. citizen, valid driver's license.
And background checks.
Oh, yeah. Comprehensive background investigation, polygraph exam, and you have to be able to get and keep a top-secret security clearance.
High bar. And the training must be pretty intense.
It is. New hires have to complete 2 main programs down at FLETC.
Which are?
The Criminal Investigators Training Program, CITP, which lots of federal agents do, and then the NCIS-specific Special Agent Basic Training Program, SABTP.
So general federal training plus NCIS-specific stuff.
Right. Classroom work on procedures, law, techniques, plus practical field exercises. And if you haven't served in the Navy or Marines before, you also do a correspondence course on naval orientation.
Get familiar with the environment.
Exactly. After all that, agents can specialize in different career tracks.
Okay. And standard gear, like firearms.
Yep. As of recently, standard issue for new grads is a Glock pistol in 9mm.
Glocks. Pretty standard.
Yeah. They also authorize other weapons like shotguns, M4 or MK18 rifles for certain needs if you're trained.
Right. Now, we almost can't talk about NCIS without mentioning TV. That show is everywhere.
Oh, the NCIS television series. Huge global phenomenon since 2003.
Yeah.
And all the spin-offs. NCIS, Los Angeles, New Orleans, Hawaii, Sydney.
They've certainly put a version of NCIS in front of a massive audience, fictionalized, of course.
Highly fictionalized, yeah. But interesting fact, several real former NCIS directors have actually made cameo appearances on the shows.
No kidding. That's cool. And there's a prequel now, too.
Yeah, NCIS. Origins, looking at Gibbs's early days in NIS.
Right. But it's not just fiction, right? There have been documentaries about the real NCIS.
Absolutely. Shows like Recon, Military CSI, Inside the Real NCIS, The Real NCIS, 48 Hours, NCIS. They've given glimpses into actual cases and how agents work.
So people can see some of the reality, too. NCIS has even shown up in movies and books.
Definitely. The movie A Few Good Men from '92. A NIS investigation is central to that plot.
Ah, right. You can't handle the truth.
That's the one. And there was a TV movie, Dangerous Evidence, the Lori Jackson story, based on a book about a real NIS case.
Okay.
Plus, NCIS gets mentioned in lots of other books, fiction like Richard Marcinko's Rogue Warrior, and non-fiction accounts about the Pollard spy case, for example.
Even Dick Tracy was involved somehow.
Sort of. In some old comic strips and novels, Dick Tracy actually had Skint as an ONI agent, which was the precursor to NCIS.
Huh. Fun fact. Okay, so for anyone wanting to learn more, there are related organizations and concepts worth knowing about.
Yeah, the sources list other military investigative bodies, DCIS for the Defense Department, OSI for the Air Force, Army CID.
Are they counterparts in other branches?
Right, and related concepts like Master at Arms, Shore Patrol, the JAG Corps, the lawyers, and of course ONI, where it all started.
Well, this has definitely been a deep dive. NCIS is clearly way more complex, way more essential than I think most people realize.
Absolutely. We've traced it over, more than a century. From that small intel group to this global federal law enforcement agency.
With just an incredibly diverse job, protecting Navy and Marine assets and people all over the world.
It's quite striking, isn't it, how broad their work is. Everything from crime on bases to, complex cyber threats, global terrorism.
Yeah. And all done by this dedicated team, civilian and military professionals.
It really makes you think, though, this whole exploration of NCIS, it brings up a big question for you, the listener.
Which is?
What does it mean to have such a powerful investigative agency operating often unseen on this global stage. How do you balance that constant need for security with, fundamental principles like freedom and privacy?
That's a tough balance.
It's incredibly delicate. And understanding organizations like NCIS, what they do, how they operate, it's pretty essential for grappling with those complexities in our world today. Something to think about.